According to our next speaker, marketeers tend to bring the way they used to work with traditional platforms along to social media. That does not work. You can't think of ROI and selling when communicating on Facebook, for example. Ankit Desai is managing partner at Rosenqvist and Desai and works with digital strategies at Universal Music Sweden, among other companies. Welcome, Ankit Desai.
All right. As soon as I can get my hands on a clicker, I guess I'll start. Yeah. Okay. All right. Thank you for having me, guys. So I'm originally from India, and my great-grandfather actually was an astrologer, and his particular brand of astrology involved looking at your date of birth and the way the stars were aligned on the day of your birth, and the Hindu calendar, and predicting stuff about your life. I'm guessing he didn't predict I'll be doing this. But so there's always been some kind of mysticism, related to Indian culture. And I remember very clearly when I was about 7 or 8 years old, and it was a warm summer night. I was walking in Mumbai with my grandfather, and he's always a bit of a joker. He goes like, "Ankit, did you know I can read minds?" And I was like, "No way." But he stopped me in the middle of the street, and he goes like, "I'll show you. Think about any number between 1 and 10 in your mind." And he goes like, "Okay, are you thinking about it?" And I nod my head. And it's really weird. We're standing in the street. He's looking into my eyes for what feels like an eternity. It was probably like 10 seconds. And then he just goes, "7. You're thinking of the number 7." And I'm like, "Oh my God, that is the greatest thing ever." That was so cool. Years later, I found out the insight behind that trick. It's if you ask anybody to think about a number between 1 and 10, most people are likely to think of 7. So I was a little bit upset at how simple that trick was. But it kind of hit home. If you take like this, like a small key human insight in the right context, and wrap it up in some sort of brilliant presentation, just how powerful the right kind of communication can be. Obviously, I grew out of India. I moved to the U.S. And then the Swedish government actually gave me a scholarship to move here to study. So today I run a small company that, among other things, helps some of Sweden's biggest artists choose what songs they should release to be hits. We help telecom companies figure out how to communicate better with their subscribers. We help startups find new users for cheaper, and somehow also help farmers optimize their fields. But the most relevant, I thought, for us today would be to talk about the transformation that the music industry has been through over the last couple of years, simply because they've just been through everything. And if you're sitting in this room today, chances are that your business is somewhere on the path of this digital transformation at some point. Everything from your service being uploaded into the cloud to, let's say, going to an access-based model like Spotify as opposed to a transactional model like buying something physically in a store, all the way to having to hire different kinds of people since the skills needed to stay competitive in your industry are changing. We've looked at all of that. And even though there's been all this change, I still believe that we're really just scratching the tip of the iceberg in terms of how we communicate, even in an industry that's gone through so much change. Still, until very recently, if Justin Bieber was coming to Sweden, their promotion manager would still pick up the phone and call a newspaper, even though that's not necessarily where his fans are hanging out anymore. So what we realize is that the rules have changed, but we're still really playing with old strategies in this new game. Raise your hand if you for the last time you saw people treating platforms equally. you know that on television, you're going to reach a lot of people, but let's say 95% of the people who watched your ad are not going to be interested in the baby diapers that you're selling, right? Online, if you do it right and you track the right things, every exposure to a customer is a potential sale, something that you can't get in other traditional media. So just to kind of illustrate my point, I want to show you guys an example of a couple of campaigns that we ran. So for those not familiar, these are Google search ads, basically. They're both exactly the same creative, exactly the same text, except that in the second case, the one below, we decided to think a little bit deeper about who we were targeting. If something wasn't working out well, or we felt we were paying too much, we would immediately pause it and reconsider. We would go deeper on the keywords that we advertised around. So instead of playlists, we would go for playlists for driving. Very simple stuff. But just that kind of thing actually, for less than half the cost, drove 4 times as many clicks. And that's kind of, that was like kind of the shocking realization that drove the change around the company that we were working with. For those of you in this room, if your company doesn't work with optimization on a daily basis in this way, you can almost be certain that you're leaving quite a bit of money on the table that you could have saved otherwise. And this was maybe 20, 30 minutes of extra work. And one of the reasons behind this, and again, I'll use the example of the music industry, but you can apply it to a lot of others. If you took, let's say, 10, 15 years ago, the way you made it as an artist, here's Lady Gaga. Let's say she gets discovered as a young, awesome artist, and she gets a record deal. She gets a lot of money in exchange for her soul, and they pay for her to record her music. They turn the music into little plastic CDs and they ship it off. Then they would buy a big TV campaign or a radio campaign, and then it would reach you as the end consumer. Obviously, today, all these middlemen are being cut out of the equation. Just in like a lot of other industries, the middlemen are getting cut out of the equation. So companies now are having to actually face the end consumer and convince them to buy their products, something that other actors took care of in before. And the way a lot of companies start to default when faced with the situation is, all right, we used to spend 500,000 crowns on this ad on TV4. Let's take it all and throw it at Facebook instead. Obviously, that's not how this works. And my favorite, we used to spam 100 different journalists with this press release. So let's take this press release and now spam 100 journalists and 10,000 fans on our Facebook page as well. Again, and these are all real life examples, unfortunately. If you look here, if I just thought I'd take out a few examples, obviously taking out the name of the person. This one, for those of you who don't speak Swedish. Countdown. Tomorrow, Jennifer Lopez releases her next single. It's produced by blah, 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 and we're super excited about it. As you can see, if you took away kind of like the social context, this is exactly how it would appear on a press release. Out of 65,000 fans on the page, it reached about 11. This one is actually even easier. If you haven't heard of Rebecca and Fiona before, there's no reason for you to stop scrolling in this case. Out of 60,000 people, it reached less than 1,000, right? It's just spam. What about this one? It says, we guess you haven't missed Ariana Grande's put up a teaser of her song. I guess if it were in isolation, it wouldn't be so bad. But when you have 4 posts with the exact same wording, that's when you start to see that your team is not super used to talking directly to the end consumer. And we tried to kind of think a little bit about why this could be. And one of the main challenges that we saw was this checkbox approach to social media in a way. Just think about how the person managing your channels is going to work with it. It's like, okay, I need to send this to the radio person at 4, then I need to write to this journalist at 4:30. Oh, and then I have to put up this Facebook message so that I can get the word out about my product. Obviously, nobody, probably in your life either, wants to be spoken to as if they were like a box to be checked off a list. And in a world where it's getting more and more important to, to be able to talk directly to your end consumer and engage them, it's super vital to have like a proper strategy. One other thing that we realized on the way is that when you post something, Facebook only, and other platforms are getting there as well, they only show your stuff to about 16% of your fans right at the beginning, and then based on how they interact with you, it starts going to more and more people. So in order to kind of get the most out of our social media, we had to learn how to be viral in a way. Simply because the way we were, the way that, the companies that we were working with before were not taking the most advantage of it. So we decided to watch a lot of cat videos to really show us how to do it. And the one, if I had to boil it down, the one conclusion that we came to is that it all starts with your fans, right? Today, it's more important than ever to really know who your core fan is, what they like, where they shop, what they read, and it doesn't make sense to to leave this to your advertising agency anymore. Of course, you might have somebody to do your final creative for you, but kind of owning the relationship, or at least the intel behind the relationship that you have with your fans, is getting more and more important. Why? Because your fans are, first of all, they're when you start off starting to communicate with your fans, and by fans I mean anybody who's interested in your product or is buying your product. For an artist, it means the actual people who stream the song. For telecom subscribers, it means the people who are subscribing to their service. For fertilizer companies, it means the people who are buying your fertilizer. Your fans tend to be the cheapest to reach. They're also already invested in your product. They know what you do. And when they interact with you, this is the most important, it spreads automatically. Simply because if me and my friend interacted with your page, our third friend is going to see it on his feed. So the economics of this world kind of mean that the same product, when it's communicated in a different way to the right audience, does exponentially better. And by this I mean, it's a difference of hundreds and millions. And I'll show you a couple of examples coming up about that. But first, how do we get there? We started out asking ourselves, who is our core fan? Who is the core consumer? And this tends to be like the kind of people who come to your events, who hang out on your page, are always commenting and liking your stuff. And if you don't know who these people are today, there's obviously, there's social media monitoring tools who will tell you who those are. If they don't exist, I'd start having, email sign-up lists at the events that you're organizing, or I'd start, asking, trying to be more interactive in your communication on social channels. We were actually also very surprised by just how much of a difference adding a question mark at the end of a lot of content that we put out would make. So we'd say, oh, this is how the day looks like at our office today. How is it going for you? And just that question mark, you'll be surprised by how many people actually come out of hiding and want to interact with you. The second thing that we looked into was what kind of content works for them. And in this case, it's just a question of testing and tracking. In the case of music, we divided into different categories. We took our core fan base that was actually teenage girls between 15 to 19 in the case of Universal Music, and we basically tested what kinds of content works on them. Is it pictures? Is it video? Is it links? At the moment, Facebook Live obviously seems to be all the rage, and it's getting more and more favored by Facebook. We also looked at what messaging strategies work with these fans. So in the case of a telecom company, we thought about, is it nostalgia towards home? Is it that you should call your mom and dad and kind of trying to make them miss their parents, which works? Or is it your favorite football player uses this telephone subscription, so you should get it too? And it's very it's very, very simple tracking and then focusing on the focusing your content strategy towards what the results are telling you. And it sounds like a lot of basic stuff, but it's stuff that so many companies are still not doing. And then the third thing, once you have these two in place, is trying to scale it up. And in this case, what we try to, the way we try to look at it is the way, everybody's familiar, I'm assuming, with the marketing funnel, right? You have people who come in on top, you offer them something for free, and then you have like a kind of like a medium investment step in the middle, and then at the bottom, you've churned out your core fans. What our thought was to try to invert that. You start with your core fans on top, right? And you make sure by interacting with them, by giving them gifts, by rewarding them, that they have such an amazing time that automatically it starts showing up on their friends' feeds. And then once these friends are in the funnel, you make them have an incredible time. And that's kind of how we started to expand this this marketing funnel outward sustainably, virally, and organically. One of our favorite things before we put out any content is to go through the scrolling test. And this is basically, if you think about where people in your life or you yourself use social media, like I personally use it when I'm waiting in line for coffee or when I'm waiting for the train on the platform. You just want like that 1 or 2 minutes, basically, of entertainment. And you log in, and above there's this post by, let's say, your uncle who just had his second kid, and you're super happy for him. Below is like Johanna, who's just having a great time in Mallorca on vacation, and you're super happy for her. And in the middle, then there's like some product from some company you've never heard of trying to get you to go to another page. Obviously, when you put it in this context, it's not going to work. So, very simple test. We try to, before putting anything out, we try to put it, if it was in this context, would it make me stop scrolling? And if it passes that test, great. But kind of like on a higher level, what we're like a couple of trends that we're starting to see is that attention is everything, right? We're moving from, in a lot of industries, we're moving from transaction-based to access-based. We're moving from direct-to-consumer selling to being more top of mind. This particular example is Miley Cyrus before, at the moment she went from being a Disney princess to whatever she is today. And 3 or 4 days after this, she released a new song which went right to the top. And why was that? Because everybody was talking about it. You see this over and over. If you follow music as closely as I do, you've probably followed the transformation of Justin Bieber from teen pop idol to very, very credible star today. Attention is everything. And it all began with him getting roasted on Comedy Central, so everybody felt bad for him. The second thing is that there are no more gatekeepers. Once again, just to kind of really emphasize, middlemen are getting cut out every day. So it's getting more and more and more important to get a long-lasting and positive, engaging relationship with your end consumer. And the third thing is that data is king. And obviously, like people throw around the word data as well, and I don't. By this, I don't necessarily mean accounting data or sales data or product usage data. It could be anything that you can track. It's as simple as tracking the categories of the kinds of posts that you've been making on your social media over the last 30 days. Just keeping a track of these things often gives a lot of really, really good insights. And then, of course, it's a question of how you funnel that back in to your marketing operations. So here's I thought I'd share with you guys like a couple of examples of what happens when we actually implement some changes like these. In this case, we took like the same song and we overlaid a dancing dolphin on top of it, and that was about 25 minutes extra of work, and it reached about 4 times as many people for free, from 10,000 to 40,000. The next example, again, that was Rebecca and Fiona. In this case, there's another artist, Eminem, and basically it's we tried to build some intrigue. Eminem's version of comedy or comics is exactly as child-friendly as you think it is, and once again, it quadrupled our average reach for free. And that was still like right at the very beginning. Today we're seeing more like posts or our social reach going into the millions, which is interesting for a page which is completely in Swedish, and there's about 10 million Swedish speakers in the world. So we actually went, so it's been kind of an interesting journey. We went in about July to reaching about 10,000 users to 1.3 million Swedes now a month in the course of like 6 or 7 weeks months. And I think last month one of the pages that we managed was actually voted the most engaging non-news page in Sweden. And it's interesting because they asked us what were some of the things that we did to get there. And the answer was, if you have this key human insight in the right context and wrap it up in a good presentation, you'd be very good. So in other words, magic. Thank you guys for listening. All right.
Thank you, Ankit. I realize that I am often a box in a checklist, being a journalist.
Yeah, I can imagine.
Yeah.
It really is a challenge. It's one of the things that, and it's something that we need to keep, or I try to keep reminding the people that I work with, simply because there's always so much that you need to do. And one of the things that tends to help is to always look at, especially when you're going through some sort of transformation, to look at what are the things that I'm actually doing today? Because when you start doing new things, it's very likely that some of the old things that you were doing need to stop being done.
Yeah.
So you have to just take stuff off your table.
Like sending the email and then the telephone call. Okay. Do you have any questions on Twitter, Sophia?
We have a few sort of thoughts and ideas.
Comments? Yeah.
But I was thinking about, you said that you have to take something away. What have you taken away? You sort of like the checkbox thing you talked about.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So one interesting thing is that that we canceled our subscription to My News Desk, which is like this PR, because instead of trying to spam journalists, we decided that we need much fewer relationships, like quality relationships with journalists. That was one of the things. Another of the things was we advised Universal, which they ended up doing, to completely take away all TV advertising as well. So beginning last year, they haven't advertised on TV at all. And this has actually helped them reduce, I don't know if I can say the actual number, but reduce a very significant portion of their marketing budget. So it's just a question of constantly looking at what you've been doing and its relevance in the new world in a way.
Yeah, but is this really? Can you really apply this in any kind of company? Because it's easy to sit there and think, well, he works with music and that they have cool artists and everything. Could you really apply this the way of thinking in all companies?
Well, absolutely, because I definitely don't know if you'll get the exact same kinds of results. It might even be better, because the rules of social media and the way the whole thing is set up remain the same. If you can find it just happens to be that there's a lot of 13 to 19-year-old girls in Sweden who are interested in Justin Bieber, but if you can find an audience of people who are interested in what you do, it may not be your specific fertilizer company or whatever it is, but it could be that they're interested in farming, right? It doesn't need to be a page or it doesn't need to be a page under the name of that company. But as long as you can put out content that these people like, then you can start seeding your own sales into there at some point.
Great. Do you have any other questions in the room, for example? Just raise your hand. Yeah. Thank you so much to Ankit. Thank you.
Guys.